That morning, Eric Lawson laughed at my old fence, and I realized years of quiet patience had led to this exact moment. The coffee cup warmed my hands as I stood at the kitchen window, watching him gesture dismissively at the weathered wood panels separating our properties. His smirk cut through the October air like a knife. Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? Every polite nod, every small concession, every sure go-ahead, had built a history I didn't even know I was keeping score of. I'm Carolyn Drake, 53, a nurse used to taking care of everyone. Somehow, my property, my boundaries, had become a punchline to the man next door. Eric had moved in 3 years ago with his expensive truck and louder opinions. From day one, he treated the neighborhood like his personal kingdom. That morning, as he stood there with his contractor pointing at my fence and laughing, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger exactly. It was clarity. The kind that comes when you've been pushed just far enough to finally see the edge. I set my cup down carefully, hands steady despite the flutter in my chest. My morning routine never changed. Wake at 6, shower, coffee, then the checklist. Bills organized by due date, calendar reminders set for neighborhood meetings, HOA payments confirmed online. I'd been the quiet organizer of Maple Street for 2 decades. The one who corrected HOA forms nobody else wanted to touch, who covered phone plans when neighbors fell short, who kept track of the shared landscaping schedule. I even paid for Mrs. Patterson's emergency vet bill last spring when her cat needed surgery. She'd promised to pay me back. She never did. I told myself it didn't matter. That's what neighbors did, right? But this morning felt different. As I updated my spreadsheet of household expenses, my eyes drifted to the window again. Eric's contractor was measuring something near the property line. Too close. Way too close. I pulled up my own property documents, the ones I'd filed carefully in a folder labeled House Records. The boundary lines were clear. That fence, old and weathered as it was, stood exactly where it should. On my side. Protecting what was mine. Eric spotted me through the window and waved. Not friendly. Looking. He walked toward my porch, boots crunching on gravel. I met him at the door before he could knock. "Morning, Carolyn," he said, that smirk still plastered across his face. "Listen, about that fence of yours." I waited. "It's kind of an eyesore, don't you think? I'm expanding my driveway, putting in some nice stonework. Professional job. That old thing," he gestured at my fence, "doesn't really fit the vision." Vision. As if my property existed to complement his landscaping dreams. "The fence is fine," I said quietly. Sure. But here's the thing, I need about 3 feet on your side to make the driveway work properly. I figured we could work something out. Maybe I buy that strip from you? Win-win. 3 feet of my land. Casual. Like asking to borrow sugar. "I'm not interested in selling," I replied. He laughed. Actually laughed. "Come on, Carolyn. It's just a little strip. Don't make this difficult." I felt my jaw tighten. "Have a good day, Eric." After he left, I sat at my kitchen table staring at nothing. My phone buzzed with reminders. Trash day tomorrow. HOA meeting Thursday. Mom's prescription refill. The invisible labor of keeping everything running smoothly. I'd spent decades being the responsible one. The reliable one. At work, I was the nurse who stayed late, covered extra shifts, fixed scheduling conflicts. At home, I was the neighbor who said yes, who smoothed over problems, who kept the peace. My calendar was color-coded chaos. Green for work. Blue for family obligations. Yellow for neighborhood commitments. Red for bills I paid that weren't mine. Too much red lately. I pulled up my notes app, scrolling through a list I'd kept privately for months. Mrs. Patterson's vet bill. The Hendersons' phone plan when they hit hard times. Extra HOA fees I'd covered when the budget fell short. Standing orders, everyone. Nobody asked anymore. They just expected. And I delivered. Because that's what good neighbors did. What good people did. But sitting there, remembering Eric's laugh, I felt something crack inside me. That evening, I lit a candle at the kitchen table and opened my journal. The pages were filled with lists, schedules, small notes about who needed what. Invisible labor, all of it. Nobody saw the spreadsheets, the careful calculations, the late nights balancing everyone else's needs. My sister called it being too nice. My ex-husband called it being a doormat. I called it being responsible. But maybe they were right. The candlelight flickered as I wrote. Some people just think rules don't apply to them. Eric's face appeared in my mind, that casual dismissal, that assumption my property was negotiable. 3 feet. Just a little strip. Like it meant nothing. But it meant everything. That fence represented a boundary. The only one I had left. I thought about all the times I'd given in quietly, smoothed things over, avoided conflict. What had it gotten me? A calendar full of other people's problems and a neighbor who thought he could laugh his way onto my land. I closed the journal carefully. Tomorrow things would change. The text came 2 days later, casual and mocking. Hey Carolyn, thought about my offer? You should really just sell me that strip. We'll both be fine. I stared at my phone screen, reading it 3 times. We'll both be fine. As if this was about both of us. As if his convenience mattered more than my property rights. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. For years, my instinct had been to smooth things over, find compromise, keep peace. But sitting there in my quiet kitchen, I felt that crack widen into something bigger. Something irreversible. I typed 4 words. That's not on me. My finger trembled slightly as I hit send. It felt like pushing a button that could explode the careful civility I'd maintained for decades. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally nothing. Silence. I set the phone down and exhaled slowly. Through the window I could see Eric's truck in his driveway, see the stakes his contractor had placed near my fence line. Too close. Way too close. I walked to my laptop and opened a new browser tab. Time to do what I should have done immediately. I paced my kitchen for 20 minutes, feeling the weight of what I'd started. Saying no wasn't supposed to feel this heavy. But it did. Every step echoed against tile floors as I replayed every small act of defiance I'd ever managed. Telling my sister I couldn't loan her more money. Refusing to cover another coworker's shift. Small rebellions that felt massive in the moment. This was bigger. This was about my home. My boundary. My right to say no without explanation or apology. I thought about Eric's assumption, his casual entitlement, his laughter. The way he dismissed my fence like it was garbage cluttering his view. My hands clenched and unclenched as I walked. Then I stopped at the window, looking out at that weathered fence. It had stood there for 30 years, solid and reliable. Just like me. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe being reliable meant people stopped seeing you as a person with needs and rights. They just saw what you could do for them. I grabbed my phone and opened my notes app. Started typing. Property research. Surveyor. Legal documentation. Each word felt like a tiny hammer strike. Building something new. Something that couldn't be dismissed with a laugh. The next morning I began my research. Property records, county documents, local ordinances. My nursing training had taught me to be thorough, to check every detail before acting. This required the same precision. I found my original property survey from when I bought the house 20 years ago. The boundary lines were crystal clear. That fence sat exactly 18 inches inside my property line. Which meant Eric's new driveway plans were encroaching by at least 3 feet, possibly more. I called 3 surveying companies, comparing prices and timelines. The third one, Morrison and Associates, could come out within the week. We'll need to place stakes marking the exact boundaries, the receptionist explained. Then we'll provide official documentation you can use for disputes. Disputes. The word hung in the air. That's what this was now. Not a neighborly disagreement. A dispute. I scheduled the appointment for Thursday morning at 9. As I clicked confirm on their website, something released in my chest. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming what had always been mine. My property. My boundaries. My right to exist without apology. The confirmation email arrived instantly. Thursday at 9. I marked it in red on my calendar. That night, doubt crept in like cold air under a door. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining scenarios. Eric would be furious. He might argue, might spread rumors at HOA meetings. The neighborhood might think I was difficult, petty, unwilling to compromise. Mrs. Patterson might give me that disappointed look she'd perfected. The Hendersons might stop waving. I'd spent 20 years building goodwill on Maple Street. Was I really willing to burn it over 3 feet of land? My mind wandered to my mother's voice, always gentle but firm. Carolyn, you need to pick your battles. But she'd also said something else years ago when my ex-husband had pushed too far. Nobody can walk on you without your permission. I'd given too much permission. To too many people. For too long. I rolled over, pulling the blanket tighter. In the darkness, I whispered the words I needed to hear. You didn't raise me to say yes to everything. My mother hadn't. She'd raised me to be kind, yes, but also to know my worth. To stand firm when it mattered. This mattered. I fell asleep with that thought and for once slept soundly. Friday afternoon, Eric tried charm. He caught me watering my garden, approaching with a friendly smile that didn't reach his eyes. Hey Carolyn. Listen, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I kept watering, saying nothing. I'm just trying to improve the neighborhood, you know? Make things look nice. Professional. That benefits everyone, including you. He paused, waiting for me to agree. I didn't. Look, I get it. Property rights matter. I respect that. But between neighbors, can't we just work this out? I just want peace. Peace. He said it like it was something he was offering me, not something he'd disrupted. I want peace too, I said carefully, not looking at him. Then let's figure this out together. Maybe I don't need the full 3 feet. Maybe we can compromise. I turned off the water, faced him directly. The fence stays where it is, Eric. On my property. His smile faltered. You're really going to be difficult about this? I'm being clear, I replied evenly. He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. Your choice. He walked away and I noticed his hands were clenched at his sides. Thursday morning arrived wrapped in gray clouds and damp air. I dressed carefully, jeans and a sweater, practical boots. By 8:30 I was standing in my driveway watching for the surveyor's truck. At 8:55 it pulled up. A woman in her 40s stepped out, carrying equipment I didn't recognize. Ms. Drake? I'm Angela Morrison. We shook hands. Her grip was firm, professional. She immediately began setting up, pulling out a measuring device mounted on a tripod, explaining each step in calm technical terms. We'll start by locating the original property markers, then verify against county records. Once we confirm the boundaries, we'll place stakes at key points. Her assistant, a younger man with careful hands, began marking points with orange spray paint. The sound of measurements being called out, the click of equipment locking into place, all of it felt ceremonial somehow. Like I was reclaiming something stolen so gradually I hadn't noticed it disappearing. Angela worked methodically, checking her equipment twice, referencing documents on her tablet. Through my peripheral vision I saw Eric's curtain move. He was watching. Good. Let him watch. Let him see what happens when you underestimate the quiet ones. Angela paused at the corner nearest Eric's property. She rechecked her measurements, frowned slightly, then checked again. My stomach tightened. Had I been wrong? Had I misread my own documents? Everything okay? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up, nodded slowly. Just confirming something. Give me a moment. Her assistant came over and they conferred quietly, pointing at markers, checking the tablet screen. Time stretched impossibly. A minute felt like 10. Finally, Angela straightened and walked over to me. Miss Drake, I need to show you something. My heart hammered. She led me to the corner stake, pointing at where Eric's new driveway construction had begun. Based on the original survey and current county records, his construction is encroaching on your property by approximately 3 feet 2 inches. 3 feet 2 inches. More than he'd admitted to wanting. Are you certain? I asked. Absolutely. We'll document everything officially, but yes. I'm certain. Relief and vindication flooded through me in equal measure. I wasn't crazy. Wasn't petty. Wasn't being difficult. I was being right. Angela continued placing stakes, orange flags marking the true boundary line. Each one felt like a small victory. I stood next to the newly placed stakes, feeling the physical weight of boundaries finally respected. These weren't just markers in the ground. They were proof. Evidence that my quiet discomfort had been justified all along. The fence I'd maintained for decades stood exactly where it belonged. On my side. Protecting what was mine. Angela handed me preliminary photos on her tablet. The orange stakes created a clear line, and Eric's half-finished driveway crossed it obviously, undeniably. We'll have the official report ready by Monday, she said. It'll include measurements, photographs, and documentation you can provide to your HOA or use legally if needed. Legally. The word should have scared me. Instead it felt like armor. I wasn't just a frustrated neighbor anymore. I was someone with documentation, with proof, with rights that couldn't be dismissed or laughed away. As Angela packed up her equipment, I noticed Eric's front door opening. He stepped onto his porch, arms crossed, face hard. Our eyes met across the distance. I didn't look away. For the first time in years I felt something powerful. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Just presence. The simple, radical act of taking up space without apology. Standing up doesn't make you cruel, I whispered to myself. It makes you alive. By Saturday the whispers started. I heard them at the grocery store, saw them in sideways glances at the neighborhood mailboxes. Mrs. Patterson mentioned it while watering her roses. I heard you and Eric are having some trouble? Her tone was careful, probing. Just clarifying property boundaries, I replied neutrally. Oh. Well, I hope you two can work it out. He seems like such a nice man. Really invested in improving the neighborhood. Nice man. I wondered if she'd call me a nice woman if I'd laughed at someone's property and tried to take it. The Hendersons avoided eye contact entirely, hurrying into their house when they saw me. At Tuesday's HOA meeting I felt the shift. People who usually greeted me warmly now offered tight smiles. Eric had been busy, I realized. Planting seeds. Making me the difficult one, the unreasonable neighbor who wouldn't compromise. I sat quietly through discussions about holiday decorations and snow removal schedules, waiting. When new business opened up, Eric cleared his throat. I'd like to address a situation developing between myself and Ms. Drake. Every head turned toward me. I met his gaze steadily, my folder of survey documents resting calmly on my lap. Let him talk. I had something better than words. I had proof. Walking home from that HOA meeting I felt lighter somehow. The social pressure Eric tried to create hadn't crushed me like it should have. Maybe because I'd spent so many years carrying everyone else's weight that I'd built a tolerance. Or maybe because for once I wasn't questioning myself. I knew I was right. That night I sat at my kitchen table with the preliminary survey report Angela had emailed. Clean, professional, undeniable. The measurements lined up perfectly with my original property documents. Eric's driveway encroached 3 feet 2 inches onto my land. I printed 3 copies, filed one, saved one for the HOA and kept one for myself. The hum of the refrigerator filled the quiet kitchen. Somewhere outside a dog barked. Normal sounds of normal life. But I felt different. Less burdened. Clearer. I thought about all the times I'd smoothed over conflicts, absorbed other people's problems, made myself smaller to keep peace. What had that peace cost me? My boundaries. My voice. My right to simply exist without constantly apologizing for taking up space. This fence dispute wasn't really about property. It was about finally learning that my needs mattered too. That saying no wasn't cruel. It was necessary. Essential even. Monday morning the official report arrived via email. 43 pages of documentation, photographs, measurements, legal descriptions. Every stake, every boundary marker, every inch of encroachment detailed with professional precision. I downloaded it immediately, saved multiple copies and printed the summary page. The evidence was overwhelming. Angela had flagged not just the driveway encroachment but also 2 decorative lampposts Eric had installed last spring. Both sat on my property, along with a section of his new fence. I hadn't even noticed the fence violation. It ran along the back corner, easy to miss unless you were looking carefully. But the survey found it, documented it, proved it. I took photos of everything with my phone. The stakes with their orange flags. The driveway construction clearly crossing the boundary line. The lamppost. Each click of my camera shutter felt deliberate, purposeful. Like I was building a case not for revenge but for justice. Simple, quiet justice. That afternoon I drafted an email to the HOA president, attaching the full survey report and summary. Subject line: Property boundary clarification, 247 Maple Street. Polite. Professional. Factual. No emotion, no accusations. Just documentation that couldn't be argued with or dismissed. I read it 3 times before sending. Then clicked send and closed my laptop. Tuesday afternoon I saw Eric notice the stakes. He stood in his driveway, staring at the orange flags marking the true boundary line. His face went from confused to furious in seconds. My heart raced watching from my kitchen window, but I didn't hide. Didn't duck away. I'd done nothing wrong. He pulled out his phone, made a call. Paced angrily. gestured at the stakes like they were personally insulting him. 20 minutes later, a truck pulled up. His contractor. They walked the property line together, Eric pointing, the contractor shaking his head, checking his own measurements. I saw the moment the contractor realized. Saw him pull out plans, compare them to the stakes, then shrug in a way that clearly said, "Not my problem." Eric's face reddened. After the contractor left, Eric marched to my front door. Pounded hard enough that I felt it through the floor. I waited 10 seconds, steadied my breathing, then answered. "You had no right," he spat before I could speak. "No right to bring surveyors onto my property." "They only marked my property," I said calmly. "Your property line is clearly marked now too. This is insane. You're being completely unreasonable. The survey is official and documented. You're building on my land, Eric. That's not an opinion. It's a fact." I sent my email to the HOA at exactly 3 p.m. Wednesday, copying all board members. Professional. Thorough. Impossible to ignore. Within an hour, the HOA president replied, "Received. We'll review and schedule discussion." By evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patterson. "Carolyn, did you really need to involve the HOA? Couldn't you two work this out privately?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Years ago, I would have second-guessed myself, apologized, tried to explain. Not anymore. "The survey is official documentation," I typed back. "The HOA needs to be aware of property boundary disputes." She didn't respond. Thursday morning brought another text, this time from Eric himself. "You're making a huge mistake. I've lived in this neighborhood long enough to know how these things go. People remember who causes problems." It was a threat disguised as friendly advice. The old Carolyn would have felt afraid. Would have worried about being excluded, gossiped about, labeled difficult. The new Carolyn took a screenshot, saved it to a folder labeled documentation, and blocked his number. If he wanted to communicate, he could do it officially. Through proper channels. With the HOA. Or lawyers. Let him try to twist facts. I had measurements. I had photographs. I had official documentation. He had nothing but assumptions and entitlement. Friday evening, Eric cornered me at the neighborhood fall gathering. I'd almost skipped it, but refusing to go felt like letting him win. So I went, brought apple cider, smiled politely at neighbors who weren't quite meeting my eyes. Eric approached while I stood near the snack table, his voice low but sharp. "You're making a big mistake, Carolyn." I took a sip of cider, said nothing. "I'm serious. You think you're proving something, but all you're doing is making enemies. This neighborhood has a long memory. So do property records," I replied quietly. His jaw clenched. "You could have just worked with me. Could have been reasonable. Instead, you're ruining everything over a few feet of dirt." 3 feet 2 inches, I corrected. "On my property. Not dirt. Land I own. Land you're building on without permission." "This isn't over," he said, voice dropping further. "I have lawyers. I have resources. You think some small-town surveyor's report means anything?" I met his eyes directly. "I think official documentation means everything." He stared at me for a long moment, then walked away. My hands trembled slightly as I set down my cup, but inside I felt steady. Clear. I'd spoken my truth calmly, without anger. Without apologizing. That felt like its own kind of victory. That weekend I almost faltered. Doubt crept back in during the quiet hours, whispering questions. What if Eric really did have better lawyers? What if this dragged on for months, years? What if I'd started something I couldn't finish? Saturday night, I sat at my kitchen table with all my documentation spread out. Original property deed. Survey from 20 years ago. New survey with measurements and photographs. HOA correspondence. Every text, every email, everything meticulously organized and saved. My nursing training had taught me this. Documentation protects you. If it's not recorded, it didn't happen. I'd recorded everything. The paper trail was immaculate. But doubt still whispered. Sunday morning I called my sister. Told her the whole story. She listened quietly, then said something that shifted everything. "Carolyn, you've spent your whole life documenting everyone else's needs. Their schedules, their bills, their emergencies. For once, you're documenting your own rights. Don't stop now." He was right. This wasn't about winning or revenge. It was about standing firm on documented truth. I had receipts. I had measurements. I had professional validation of something I'd known all along. I belonged here. My boundaries mattered. My property was mine. Eric could bluster and threaten all he wanted. Facts don't care about volume. Monday brought the reckoning. The HOA scheduled an emergency meeting specifically to address the boundary dispute. Both Eric and I were required to attend, present our documentation and allow the board to mediate. I arrived early, folder in hand, wearing my favorite navy blazer. Professional. Composed. Ready. Eric arrived late, flanked by his contractor and someone in an expensive suit who I assumed was his lawyer. They took seats across the conference table, Eric's arms crossed, face set in a scowl. The HOA president, Mr. Wallace, opened the meeting formally. We're here to review the property boundary dispute between 247 and 251 Maple Street. Ms. Drake has provided survey documentation. Mr. Lawson has requested opportunity to respond. I presented first. Methodically laid out my original property survey, the new professional survey, photographs showing the encroachment, measurements confirming 3 feet 2 inches of violation. I spoke calmly, stating facts without emotion. When I finished, Mr. Wallace nodded slowly. Mr. Lawson, your response? Eric's lawyer stood up, but before he could speak, Angela Morrison entered the room. I apologize for being late, she said. I'm the surveyor who conducted the assessment. I believe my presence was requested. Eric's face went pale. Angela had brought additional documentation. Overhead aerial photos comparing property lines to current construction. Historical records showing the original fence placement. County verification of all boundary markers. For 45 minutes she presented evidence so thorough, so professionally documented, that Eric's lawyer stopped trying to interrupt. Just sat there, occasionally whispering to Eric, who looked increasingly trapped. When Angela finished, silence filled the room. Heavy. Absolute. Mr. Wallace cleared his throat. Based on this documentation, the boundary violation is clear and substantial. Mr. Lawson, you'll need to halt construction immediately and restore Ms. Drake's property to its original state. Eric stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're all, Mr. Lawson, Mr. Wallace interrupted firmly. The evidence is conclusive. The board has made its decision. Eric stormed out, his lawyer following. His contractor stayed behind, apologizing quietly to Mr. Wallace, promising immediate compliance. I sat there, folder still open, heart pounding but mind clear. I'd won. Not with shouting or manipulation or social pressure. With truth. With documentation. With the simple, powerful act of standing firm on what was right. The next morning, Eric's construction crew arrived early. But instead of building, they were dismantling. Piece by piece, they removed the driveway sections that crossed onto my property. Pulled up the decorative lamp post. Relocated his fence section. I watched from my kitchen window, coffee warming my hands, feeling something release that I hadn't known I'd been holding. Eric didn't appear. Sent his contractor to handle everything, couldn't face the consequences of his own overreach. By late afternoon, orange caution tape marked where his property ended and mine began. The crew filled in holes, smoothed gravel, even repaired sections of my old fence his construction had damaged. His contractor knocked on my door around 5 p.m. Ms. Drake, we've completed the removal and restoration. If you notice anything we missed, please let me know directly. His tone was respectful, almost apologetic. Thank you, I said simply. After he left, I walked my property line slowly. The stakes were still there, orange flags bright against gathering dusk. My fence stood strong, exactly where it had always been. Exactly where it belonged. I thought about Eric's laugh that first morning, his casual assumption that my boundaries were negotiable. Thought about all the small moments I'd swallowed objections, avoided conflict, chose peace over principle. Not this time. This time I'd chosen both. The following week's HOA meeting was different. People who'd avoided my eyes now nodded politely. Mrs. Patterson actually apologized. I'm sorry I doubted you, Carolyn. I should have trusted that you knew your own property. The Hendersons waved from across the parking lot. Small gestures, but they mattered. Eric didn't attend. His house showed minimal activity for days. Then on Thursday, a for sale sign appeared in his yard. I felt no triumph seeing it. No satisfaction. Just a quiet acknowledgement that some people can't handle being wrong. Can't face consequences. Would rather run than rebuild on honest ground. Friday afternoon, Mr. Wallace called me. Carolyn, I want to apologize. We should have taken your concerns seriously from the start. Your documentation was impeccable. Thank you, I said. Actually, I was wondering if you'd consider joining the HOA board. We need someone with your attention to detail and integrity. I paused surprised, then smiled. I'll think about it. After hanging up, I realized something profound. For years, I'd believed being helpful meant saying yes to everything. Being accommodating. Being flexible with my own boundaries so others could be comfortable. But true helpfulness, real integrity sometimes meant saying no. Meant standing firm. Meant demanding others respect what was yours while you respected what was theirs. That's not being difficult. That's being honest. Being whole. Being fully, unapologetically present in your own life. The first Saturday of November, I stood at my fence with fresh coffee, watching sunrise paint the sky orange and pink. The air was crisp, clean, carrying the smell of fallen leaves and approaching winter. My fence looked better than it had in years. I'd repainted it last weekend, a warm honey brown that glowed in morning light. The property line stakes were gone now, their job done. But I remembered exactly where they'd been. Remembered the feeling of watching professionals validate what I'd known all along. Behind me, my house hummed quietly. Bills paid, calendar organized, life running smoothly. But the red entries were gone. No more standing orders for other people's emergencies. No more silent subsidies. Just my own responsibilities managed carefully. My own boundaries respected firmly. My cat wandered out through the pet door, rubbed against my leg. I reached down, scratched behind her ears. This peace, this morning quiet, this simple existence in my own space. It was enough. More than enough. Across the street, new neighbors were moving into Eric's old house. A young family with 2 small children. The kids laughed as they chased each other across the yard. Their father waved at me. I waved back, genuinely smiling. Fresh starts for everyone. Sometimes that's what boundaries create. Space for something better. 3 months later, winter had settled over Maple Street with gentle snow and early darkness. Inside my warm kitchen, I worked on next month's schedule, but it looked different now. Sparse. Manageable. Just my shifts, my appointments, my life. The HOA board position sat in green on my calendar. I'd accepted and discovered I actually enjoyed it. Not the power. The clarity. The ability to help people understand rules, boundaries, systems that protected everyone equally. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister. Proud of you, Carolyn. You finally chose yourself. I smiled, typed back. Turns out that helps everyone. Outside, snow drifted past my window. My fence stood solid, freshly painted, marking exactly what was mine. Not with aggression or hostility. Just with truth. I thought about that morning Eric had laughed. Thought about the crack that opened inside me, the clarity that followed. How terrifying it had felt to say those 4 words. That's not on me. But those words had changed everything. Given me back my property. My boundaries. My voice. My peace. Sometimes the strongest revenge is simply being right. Simply standing firm on truth and letting facts speak louder than laughter. If you've ever chosen peace over guilt, share your story below. You're not alone in learning that the most powerful word isn't yes. It's no. And sometimes it's this is mine.